everyone. Myself, Dr. Yogita Gupta. We know innovation is the lifeblood of entrepreneurship. However, having a great idea or even a functional prototype is only the beginning of the journey towards building a successful startup. The real challenge lies in systematically organizing innovation, validating prototypes, and converting those early stage innovation into scalable. Market ready ventures, this process involves more than just technical refinement. It requires a strategic blend of customer discovery, development, and business model alignment. For this, to shed more light on this particular topic, I am pleased to introduce our guest, Mr. Jeetendra Sharma, a globally accomplished product marketing and management professional with over 32 years of experience across 16 countries, holding double master degrees and boosting rich experience in international business, including nearly 12 years as a regional category manager. Our speaker now advises businesses and trained professionals. He is also a visiting faculty member and actively involved in mentoring the youth. Now, I request Sir to take over the session.
Thank you so much, Professor Yogita, for that introduction. Let me start by trying to share my screen, and if someone could just confirm that you're able to see the screen. Yeah,
Yes, sir,
has
it
it
is
come up?
visible.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
Visible.
Thank you so much, and very good afternoon to all of you. And this is a very interesting topic and well introduced also about innovation, prototype validation, and basically how do we convert an idea or innovation into a startup. So to start with, let me just ask all of you, and anyone can even unmute and share, or I don't see chat options, but you could put in chat that what do you think is the most important for a startup success? Okay, and I'll give you a few options. Is it having a good idea, having a good team? Is it the timing of your startup? Is it funding? Or is it actually the product? So, what do you think is the most important when it comes to startup success? Anybody wants to share their thoughts?
sir, as per me, all the five things that you have noted over here is important altogether for a
Okay.
startup success. Because you're not
Hmm.
talking about startup, you're talking about the success of the startup. So everything together has to be a blend so that the success can be achieved.
Very nice, Ankita. Anybody else wants to add to that, build on that, or differ?
Yeah, I would agree because we have to have an idea which is a need of the market. We need to
Hmm.
have a team which is able to deliver it. We
Yeah,
need to have the timing right so that the market accepts it. The product has to be right.
yeah.
And
And पैसे के
eventually,
बगैर तो कुछ नहीं होता है.
yes, so we need.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So you are right. I mean, it is possibly a good blend of that. And this is something which also we'll see in this session on how all of this come together. Because one thing you will all agree that innovation is not just having an idea. It is about making ideas work in the real world. And normally we use these words innovation and startup. And number of time many people confuse the two, assuming that having a unique idea automatically means having a viable startup. If you look at these two concepts, innovation and startup, what is your thinking? Is this the same? Is it different? And if it is different, what do you see? What is the difference between innovation and startup? Anybody?
Innovation is an idea. So,
Okay.
like you said, Yeah, it's an idea that we need to work upon. It can be materialistic, non-materialistic, tangible, intangible. But when it comes to startup, it's like an idea of the workforce for the business.
Mhm.
It goes into that business direction where you are going to earn money.
Okay. o-
Financial defenses are created on it.
Okay. So are both basically ideas?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else wants to build on that? Have a different opinion?
Innovation is that we are launching some new products. So it
Mm-hmm.
will be a device or something like that, or a patent we are going to introduce in the market.
Okay.
Whereas startup, we can say it's a business idea. As before, the madam said,
Yeah.
it's like a
Agreed.
business
Agreed.
idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is a different innovation product. Startup is a business idea. Okay. Anybody else? Just trying to get your understanding thoughts. What is innovation and what is startup?
So it is interlinked, I guess. Innovation and
Okay.
startup is
Mm-hmm.
interlinked. Sometimes the existing businesses you are in,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a innovation every time to give a better delivery or the
Okay.
better ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But for the startup, whereas startup, you need a innovation ideas altogether to start something. So it is
Okay.
both way. Innovation is for existing businesses where you are in,
Mm-hmm.
and the innovation which is required for a new startup. The idea is required for a new startup. So it is
Okay.
interlinked, I guess.
Excellent. Good. Yes. There was somebody else who was
So
trying to say something.
innovation is
Yes.
the fundamental work required for a startup.
Okay. Okay. So innovation precedes startup.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Good. So good thoughts. Some very similar, some very different. So let us look at each of these concepts to understand them a bit better in this context, starting with innovation. So, innovation refers to creating something new or significantly improving something that already exists. It could be a product, service, process, or a model, basically to solve a problem in a better way. That is how we look at innovation. Now innovation, as you know, could be different types of innovation. You could have a product innovation. So for example, you develop, say, a smartwatch, a smartwatch with a lot of features. That is product innovation. Or you could have process innovation. So for example, Amazon has done a lot of automation in their logistics. That is process innovation. You could also have a business model innovation. For example, Netflix, when they moved to the subscription model, it was a innovation in business model. Or you could even have frugal innovation, which we even call as jugaad. You know, one of the very good examples is low cost sanitary pads, which Arunachalam Muruganathan had, innovated. So this is how different types of innovation takes place. But remember, innovation is not about technology alone. It's about creating real value. And that is what is innovation. Now, coming to understanding, then what is a startup? A startup is a temporary organization formed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model to bring an innovation to market. So, somebody said they are connected. Yes, they are definitely connected. A startup focuses on market fit, scalability, sustainability, and execution. A startup operates under high uncertainty. Hence, it needs validation, iterations, and agility. A startup is not just a small version of a big company, it is actually an experiment in motion. Eric Ries, the author of this book called The Lean Startup, had quoted in that book that a startup is a human institution designed to deliver a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So hopefully this gives you a better idea around innovation and startup. Yes, both are connected, both are linked, but they are two different concepts. Let us look at an illustrative example. Say a student at an IIT develops a low cost water purifier using rice husk ash, which is an innovative solution for rural households. This we would say is an innovation. Now, this idea, which gets converted into a company, say, let's call it Drinkwell, which produces this purifier at scale, sets up rural distribution network, prices it affordably, and partners with NGOs or government schemes, eventually raising funding for expansion. This is what we would call as a startup. So the innovation solves the problem, the startup takes it to the people, ensures value delivery, and creates a sustainable model. So I hope this example helps you to better understand innovation and startup. Now let's move forward. So in the introduction, when ma'am was introducing the topic, she used words like idea, prototype, etc. So let's look at this section of how to move from just having a creative idea to building a tangible prototype, or something which we call as a MVP. Anybody has heard of this term called MVP?
Market value product. So
Okay, good
nice.
guess. Anybody
Minimum
else?
viable, minimum viable product.
That is correct. So MVP is a minimum viable product. Those who have not heard, don't worry, we will be looking at it. So here, let's try and understand in this section on how to move from just having a creative idea to building a tangible prototype or a MVP, a minimum viable product that can be tested in the real world. Let us first try and understand what is a prototype, or maybe even before I share, anybody wants to try what is a prototype? How will you explain what's a prototype?
So it's a working model of I mean, the idea, conceptualized idea,
Idea.
working model.
Yes. Nice. A good explanation, Ashwini. So a prototype is a basic functional version of your idea, not the final product, but something that demonstrates how your innovation works, allows you to test assumptions, helps you gather feedback, and saves time and money before getting into full scale development. As we always say, a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So you may have number of meetings, but if you develop a prototype, you can save a lot of time and money. So now how do we move from this idea to prototype? And there is a process which can be followed. There are different stages which we can follow. The first stage is ideation, that is, define the problem clearly. So start with a clearly articulated problem and your unique solution. Ask, what problem are we solving? Who faces this problem? Why is the current solution not enough? For example, say the problem is students in remote areas don't have access to live online classes. One idea could be build a solar powered device that streams preloaded lectures. Okay, so this is the first step, ideation. The second is customer persona creation. So before prototyping, identify your target user, age, profession, lifestyle. What are their pain points? And what are the desired outcomes? The third stage is sketch the concept. Use basic drawings, flowcharts, storyboards, or wireframes to visualize your idea. The next step is to build a low fidelity prototype. Now, this is a quick, low cost version of your idea, and you could have these in different types. So, for example, you could have a digital MVP. As I told you, MVP is a minimum viable product. So, it could be just a digital MVP, which could be just a clickable wireframe, or you could have a hardware MVP. So maybe even using, say, cardboard models to show your idea, or it could be a service MVP, which is to simulate service using manual processes first before automating. Okay, so it could be on one of these. Remember, start with what is minimally functional, not what is perfect. For example, you all have heard of Dunzo. Dunzo started as a WhatsApp group where people posted the delivery needs, and the team originally fulfilled them manually. So they did not have an app initially. The next and the last step, which actually could be an optional step if you want to, which is to build a high fidelity prototype. So once your basic version is validated, you could create a closer to final version with improved user interface, user experience, functional backends, basically for web apps and the web, and possibly use better materials if you are making any physical products. For example, say a student innovates a waterless hair wash product. Your first prototype could be just mix some ingredients at home and test it with friends. Your second stage could be approach a lab for a sample formulation. Okay, so this is how you could move from an idea to a prototype. Now, even when I discussed this, I used two terminologies. I used prototype and the MVP, or a minimum viable product. Again, in essence, a lot of people use prototype and MVP in the same breath. Although they are similar, there are some small differences between what you would call as a prototype and what you would call as a MVP. Basically, the prototype demonstrates the core idea. Okay, so for example, you could visualize it could just be a paper sketch of an app screen, which is a prototype. The MVP is a functional version for early users. So in this example, it could be you actually develop a simple app with maybe just one or two features which can be tested by say 20 users. So that is a prototype and a MVP. Let us look at some real life examples to understand this better. The first example is of Ola cabs. Now, if you look at Ola cabs, what is the idea? The idea is taxi booking made easy via mobile. The prototype is you could have a simple website where people could book a cab manually handled by the founders. You convert this into a MVP, which is a basic app with location tracking and cab booking, say just in Mumbai. Another example, suppose a team wants to solve the problem of plastic waste in cafeterias. The idea could be edible cutlery. Prototype: make samples using flour and flavors at home. You then test it out, maybe at a college fest, and gather feedback. And then you could move to making a minimum viable product, which is batch production and packaging for trial with local cafes. So how you get the stage by stage how you can move from idea to a prototype or a MVP. Remember one thing: don't wait to perfect your idea. Rather, test it quickly. Your first prototype is not your final product. It's your first conversation with users. Okay, so this is all about moving from idea to a prototype or a MVP. Now, once you have it, the prototype, you get into the next stage, which is validation. Some people say that you build something and they will come to buy it. This is a myth. Validation ensures you are solving a real problem for real people who are willing to pay or adopt your solution. Now, why prototype validation? Prototype validation helps to save time, money, and effort. Avoid building something nobody wants. Learn what works and what doesn't. Discover market fit early and to gain credibility with investors and stakeholders. So, why do you validate? First is you look at the problem. Is it a real pain point for users? So, this gets validated. Second is the solution itself. Does your prototype solve the problem effectively? Third, usability. Can users easily understand and use your product? Then we move forward. Desirability. Do users really want your product? And then finally, because we are here to get into commercialization, so willingness to pay. Would users actually pay for it? And all of these can be validated with your prototype. Let us now look at some top prototype validation methods on how you can validate your prototypes. First method is customer interviews or field testing. Here, talk directly to your target users. Observe them using your prototype and ask open-ended questions like, what do you like or dislike? Would you use this? What would you improve? For example, say a student team is building a wearable fitness tracker. They test early versions with athletes in a college gym to see how easy it was during their workouts. So, this is validation. Another method is landing page testing. So, here you could create a simple web page describing your product. Ask users to sign up for early access or updates and track the clicks, sign-ups, or interest. For example, you would have all heard of Dropbox. Dropbox used a short demo video explaining their product before it even existed. And this generated thousands of sign-ups, proving there was demand. The third method is called fake door testing. Here, you pretend a feature exists and see if users try to use it. When they click it, then you could just show, coming soon or ask for feedback. For example, an edtech platform showed a live classes button on their portal. When users clicked it, it recorded their interest and collected emails for beta testing. The next method is crowdfunding as validation. Here, you could put your prototype or concept on platforms, crowdfunding platforms. If you've heard of these, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Keto, etc., these are all crowdfunding platforms, and see if people are willing to pre-order or support the idea. For example, if you've heard of Pebble smartwatch, they became a global brand after raising millions through Kickstarter purely from a working prototype. Some more methods: you could do pilot testing or beta testing, which is offer the product to a limited set of users for free or reduced cost. Collect feedback and usage data. For example, there's this organization called Niramai, which is basically it's an AI based company for cancer, breast cancer detection. They tested their prototype in a few hospitals before launching a full commercial product. And then we have usability testing, which is where you give users the product and ask them to perform tasks while you observe and you note where they struggle or get confused. Okay, so these are some top prototype validation methods. Now, let us look at some real life examples of companies who have actually done this. Okay, so this will actually make it real for you. Um, some examples I've already been sharing, so we'll see more details on that. The first is Ola. So the prototype was a simple app with manual cab booking. How did they do validation? They tested with users in Mumbai and they discovered huge demand for reliable cabs. They then iterated and scaled. Another example is Paperboat. Their prototype was local taste beverages in innovative packs, and validation was they distributed free samples at events and retail stores and obtained feedback, which they used to finalize the flavors and packaging. Another example is Find. Find is into fashion e commerce, and they created a WhatsApp catalog to test if users would order clothing through messaging. And the strong response led to app development. So these are certain examples. So if you just look at this whole thing around validation, remember that validation is iterative. It is not just a one time process. In fact, you should think of validation as an ongoing loop where you build, you test, you learn. Based on that, you improve and then repeat. And whenever you're doing validation, I would encourage you to start small, iterate quickly, stay close to users, and track metrics like interest, usage, feedback, and reference. One again important key takeaway from this is don't fall in love with your solution. Fall in love with the problem and let validation guide the path. So what we've seen so far, let us corroborate it with some real world examples. Okay, all these steps which we've seen so far. So some real world examples basically to illustrate how real startups, both Indian and global, moved from an idea, built a prototype, validated it, and then successfully transitioned into scalable startups. The first example is Dropbox. So if you see Dropbox, they identified the problem that people found it difficult to sync and share files across multiple devices. The prototype, the innovation was a seamless cloud storage and sync solution. They first validated this. So instead of building the full product, they made a 3-minute demo video showing how Dropbox would work. So the key takeaway from this real world example is, the result was that 75,000 signups they got overnight. And the key takeaway, you don't need to build it to validate. So just by a prototype, they got the validation. Another example is Airbnb. I hope all of you have heard of Airbnb. Problem which they identified was expensive and limited hotel options during conferences and travel. The innovative idea which they then developed a prototype was to rent out air mattresses in homes and also give breakfast. So bed and breakfast. They validated it by testing it, by renting out their own apartment. The founders rented out their own apartment during a design conference in San Francisco, and they created a simple website and manually coordinated stays. Key takeaway, start by solving the problem personally and scale it later. Next example is Pebble smartwatch. Problem they identified, no customizable smartwatch that worked across platforms. So they built an innovative prototype, a smartwatch with long battery life and custom features. They did validation. They posted the concept and prototype video on Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding platform. The result, they raised $10 million from 68,000 backers, even without having a full product. So, what we can learn, crowdfunding can be a powerful validation and funding method. Let's look at one more real world example, which we have discussed a couple of times, which was Ola Cabs. The problem, unreliable taxi services and poor last mile transport. The innovation and prototype, they built an app to book reliable taxis with location tracking. And the way they did validation, they started with 2 cars and manual bookings in Mumbai. They tested pricing, booking patterns, and user interest. So, the key takeaway for us, begin lean, small. Real validation comes from real usage. Another example, which I touched earlier, Dunzo. Problem, people needed help completing everyday errands. The innovation and prototype, a concierge like service to get things done. How did they validate this? Initially, Dunzo operated as a WhatsApp group. Users posted errands and the team fulfilled them manually. After receiving repeat use and word of mouth traction, they then developed an app. So, learning for us, your prototype could just be a process and not too tech heavy also. If you look at what Paperboat did, they identified the problem that nostalgic Indian drinks weren't available in ready to drink form. So the innovation they had, which they tested through prototype, was bottled traditional drinks like Aam Panna and Jaljeera. They distributed free samples at events and shops, collected feedback on the flavor, packaging, and pricing. They iterated and launched in retail stores. So, what we can learn is that product sampling is a powerful prototype validation method. Another example, which I told you about, Niramai, which is a Bangalore based health tech unit, they identified the problem as late diagnosis of breast cancer due to the lack of access and also the stigma associated with it. They developed thermal imaging using AI for early non invasive detection. The validation process they used, they tested prototypes in pilot programs at hospitals, took feedback from doctors and patients. So, learning for us in health tech, validation with actual users, doctors, and patients is critical. One more example, this is Gyan which is actually a student startup. The problem they identified, lack of interactive and localized science kits for school students in rural India. The innovation they had, simple low cost science experiment kits in regional languages. How did they validate? They tested kits in government schools through workshops, and teachers and students gave direct feedback. So, what we can learn, schools and communities are great partners for grassroots innovation testing. So, to summarize our key takeaway from all these examples and what we saw, every great startup today was once a rough prototype tested by a few curious users. Now, let us go to our last section today before we close and open it up for any questions. How to convert an innovation into a startup. So, what we look at is a practical roadmap for moving from a validated innovation and prototype to launching a functioning startup. So, here we are going to emphasize on the execution, strategy, and early stage planning. Again, we'll look at different steps. So, the first step is confirm the problem solution fit. I don't know whether any of you were there in some sessions which we did earlier. There we had discussed in detail about the problem solution fit. Now, why this step is important? Make sure your innovation actually solves a meaningful problem validated by real users. The action is to review the prototype feedback, check if early adopters are using the product willingly. You can ask, are they solving their problem better than before? An example was what we saw, Dunzo. They realized that users were repeatedly using the WhatsApp group for daily errands. So, problem was validated. Step 2, build an MVP or a minimum viable product. Why? A MVP helps you test your solution in the real world without spending too much time or money. You can develop the simplest version of your product with just enough features and make it usable for early adopters. For example, Razorpay's MVP allowed startups to accept payments with minimum integration. They tested this MVP with 10 startups before then finally scaling. Step 3, define your business model. Why? Innovation is not a business until it has a value proposition, a revenue model, and a customer base. So you could use the lean canvas or business model canvas to clarify who is the customer, what value do you offer, how do you acquire and retain customers, how will you earn revenue. For example, we saw Paperboat, who sells nostalgia in a bottle. Their model was built on traditional drinks plus modern packaging plus retail partnerships. Our fourth step is then to assemble a core team. Why? Startups need more than just a founder. They need complementary skills, technology, business, marketing, operations, etc. So you will find that unfortunately a number of startup failures were because there was a founder and he had expertise in one area. Generally, you're so passionate about your product that if you feel I've developed fantastic product, it will sell on its own. No, not really. You do need other functional expertise, and then you can decide. And that is why you'll find a lot of successful startups have co-founders. So maybe say you are a technology expert, with an engineering background, but you don't have expertise around finance or marketing. Then what you could do is look for co-founders. Maybe somebody who is an expert in marketing, somebody who's an expert in finance, and then you come together. So the action is look for co-founders who share your vision but have complementary expertise. Ensure trust, accountability, and aligned values. For example, Flipkart's success was driven by the teamwork of Sachin and Binny Bansal, tech, logistics, and product expertise. Step 5, get early customers or users. Why? Real traction is the best proof that your startup has potential. It also attracts funding and partnerships. So use pilots, freemium models, early access, or partnerships to get initial users. Collect testimonials and usage data. For example, Zoho began by serving small US businesses with limited tools and gradually expanded into a full suite over years. Sixth step, explore initial funding options. Because as we saw on the first slide itself, funding is also very important and critical. Even a lean startup needs capital for development, testing, team building, or market access. Bootstrap, if possible. I hope you all have heard of what is bootstrapping. That is basically using your own funds, personal funds, either your own from friends, family, relatives, or revenues. Apply to college incubators, government grants like Startup India, etc. Or there are accelerators for startup. Also, you could consider crowdfunding or angel investors or pitch contests. You all know about, you know, Startup India, etc. Example, we saw Niramai. They received early stage support from government innovation grants and stage VC funds. And finally, set up legal, financial, and operational foundation. Why? Because to run a real business, you need to build credibility, protect your intellectual properties, and comply with regulations. So you should have a action checklist. Register the startup. So it could be either private limited, a LLP, okay, or maybe a OPC, that is a one person company. set up a company bank account, apply for Startup India DPIIT recognition. So that is the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, which is a central government department under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry in India. Sign NDAs, IP agreements if needed, and create a basic financial plan and reporting process. So these are 7 steps on how you can convert your innovation or your idea into a startup. Before I close, just one more point which you should remember is iterate constantly. See, your first version won't be your final version. So launch early, fail fast, and improve continuously. Think of this as a journey where you build, measure, learn, and then repeat. And my last slide for you, remember, an idea becomes a startup not when it's built, but when it starts solving a real problem for real people in a repeatable way. So, from a content perspective, that is all I had to share in the time available. We will now open it up for any questions, but I know that maybe we'll not be able to answer all your questions at this time. So I'm just sharing my LinkedIn profile in case anyone if you want to connect, so that if you have some afterthought questions or anything you want to discuss, you can connect with me here or maybe even go to the institute. So I'll now stop sharing and I'll hand it over back so that we can open it up for any 1 or 2 quick questions. Yeah, back to you, ma'am.
Yes, so are there any questions? Please, the session open for all of you all. Any questions, please? Everyone able to hear my voice? Yes, Supreet.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. The presentation was very good. My question is somewhere between the step 2 of prototyping or creating the MVP and step 3 of revenue generation.
Hmm.
Many of the times we see that startups, they do a prototype or they're creating a pilot more for their own purpose of validating or ensuring that the uh, idea that they have is really a requirement in the market.
Correct.
However, when they go to the or generating revenue from that, in the
Mm,
second step, they have either given away the product free or at a very minimal cost. But when
mm,
it comes to realizing revenue from the product, there are a lot of customers who do not convert. Are
yeah,
there some steps that can be taken in step 2 which could ensure that many of the conversions happen?
I think the solution to that is even before you reach step 2. Okay, and in fact, just earlier morning, I was actually having a discussion with the founder of a startup who I am sort of mentoring and guiding, and I do them to what happens is in a startup we are all thinking about the solution, right? We want to give the best solution to the people. What we forget is where did this solution come from? At the very beginning, when you had this idea, okay, and you try to build this solution, you build this solution to address a problem. The issue is later on, we forget this problem. So I think we have to keep the problem in mind and time and again go and revisit the problem, that are we very clear on what the problem is? Are we confident that this is the problem and this is the problem which users really have and are looking for a solution? Okay, so the gap always comes between that we develop a fantastic solution but then we realize, oh, nobody wants this solution. Why? Because it is not addressing the right problem. And most of the startups face this issue. So we should never forget what is the problem that we are trying to solve. Is it a genuine problem? And whatever we are offering, is it actually helping the users, save their time and money? rather than what they are currently using to solve that problem. So we have to keep reminding ourselves or going back to the problem. I think that is where the issue comes. It's not about, you have a fantastic prototype, you do good validation, good thing. Maybe we are not looking at the problem right. So the answer is, even when we do validation, don't just validate that the solution is working or not working. Validate whether the solution is actually solving the problem in the way the user wants to it and he's ready to pay money for it. So that is the key. Focus on the problem. Does that help to answer your question, Suprit?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, anyone else? Yes, so thank you, sir, for enumerating your thoughts onto organizing innovation and prototype validation. It is really great to hear from you, and that too with the reference to converting innovation into startups. That's a $1 million question, and we really enjoyed your lecture here. On behalf of all of us, students, faculty members at SCDL, this is Uttara Devrankar saying a big thank you to you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Uttara.
Thank
And thank
you.
you, everybody.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.